Death Stranding is by far one of the most unique, one of the most beautiful, and one of the most well-directed video games I have ever played. It really does ooze with tension and atmosphere. It tells a fantastic story, and it looks damn good while doing it. There really are moments where this does feel like one of the greatest games ever created. Honestly, it really does. But then there are moments where the game really withers you down and makes you feel like, what's even the point? It really feels like it tries to grind any life you have left and just throws it all away. And I believe it's kind of intentional. Death Stranding is by far one of the most unique games that looks fantastic, plays really well, that I just cannot recommend to anybody at any situation. Sam Porter Bridges is a porter, and that's not as interesting as it sounds. It's Sam's job to essentially deliver cargo and parcels across a disjointed and broken America. And it's not as if his job was already hard enough, but there's also these crazy fucking invisible monsters that are trying to kill everybody, which makes things far more difficult. And to make it even more difficult, people are still people. They're fucking terrible. And it's up to Sam to reconnect America. It's his job to get America back online, back under a central network. The main goal of Death Stranding is to get the entirety of the United States under this chiral network. The main hope is that by reconnecting everybody, you bring the entirety of America back to this unified state it once was. Which means it is in fact Sam's job to bring people their cargo, move cargo around in a pretty dangerous and fearsome world, while also connecting everybody together. He has a big responsibility, and that's really no small task. Saving America is quite a thing. So how do you do it, you ask? Well, let me tell you, you deliver boxes. On foot. But hear me out. At first, this isn't as bad as it sounds. The majority of what you do in Death Stranding is going from A to B, and at first it's surprisingly captivating. You have a lot to worry about. You're dealing with your weight balance, you're dealing with how much you're taking, you're dealing with a lot of shit. But once you've done it 3 or 4 times, you really start to lose your enthusiasm. And if I'm being honest, it is quite hard to be enthusiastic about delivering boxes across a wasteland. That being said though, I do think those calling Death Stranding a walking simulator really are doing the game a disservice. Because there's definitely a lot more to it than just walking. I mean, there's a lot of things with weight balance and character movement, and it all comes into play, and it is very captivating. It does keep you entertained. It's surprising at first, but then things really start to wither you down over time. And I'm guessing that's kind of the point. The game almost feels like you're meant to get bored of it, like it was this way intentionally. It's boring by design, which I've never seen before. But I'm going to talk about the positives first. Death Stranding is open world. You can pretty much go anywhere you want, and one of the things that really makes this great is the map. You can actually plot a route specifically to where you want to go using the map, and it's actually really intuitive, and it makes this game more about strategy than anything else. You've really got to choose a route that you think is safe, and I really like this. This is a really cool part of this game, and it's one of the main reasons I kept playing it, is because I kept using different routes to go to the same places. Other players can even leave behind tools and messages for you, and this shows up on the map. It's pretty useful when it comes to plotting your route. Honestly, I think the online interaction with other players is probably way more interesting than I've ever seen it done in a game like this. Basically, you can leave down messages, a lot like in Dark Souls, but in this game, you can do a lot more than just that. You can place down entire structures and tools and utilities that persist through other players' sessions, not just your own. And the game even has this little reputation system, so it can determine the more useful items for players, and this system seems to work really well. Quite often you'll find a rope or a ladder that's been placed in a very convenient place that makes your life easier, and then you find out it was another player and you smash that fucking like button, and it feels good. It's a cool interaction, I really like that. Death Stranding is a game that really wants you to think about weight. It wants you to think about where you want to put things on your body and how many orders you want to take on at once, because the more of stuff you take, the heavier your character gets. The heavier your character gets, the more clunky he is to control. It's all part of the game's design. But honestly, as you get later into the game, you can take a lot more weight with you, and it stops being anywhere near as much of a concern, which is kind of part of the problem if you ask me. Later on in the game you unlock these magical skeleton legs, which makes carrying a lot more weight a lot easier and a lot faster, which kind of trivializes any of the challenge that used to be there, and this can be said for a lot of elements in the game. A lot of upgrades and elements that you unlock as you progress just make the walking easier, and ergo makes the walking kind of more boring, and it is a genuine problem that this game has. And once you start getting into the later areas of the game, you start to find vehicles, and this makes the trivial aspect of delivering packages even more trivial, because they went from being easy to being laughably easy. But regardless, there's still some challenge left in the game after all. The reason America is the way it is because of the beach things, BTs. These act as the primary antagonist of Death Stranding, and these really are the only thing that adds a little monkey wrench, a little spice into your deliveries, because these enemies are all about avoidance and stealth, and they do genuinely provide a lot of tension and a lot of fear, and these really do hold the gameplay together. The amount of tension and atmosphere these areas build really do make this game worth playing. These are insanely well done. These areas are almost like something out of a horror game. The tension and atmosphere the game builds with both sound and visuals are just impeccably good. And trust me, you really don't want to be caught by these things because it's pretty awful. Which very sharply brings me on to some of the biggest problems with Death Stranding, and it all starts with these BT areas. Regardless of how cool these areas are, and regardless of how well done they are, you just see it far too often, and it really gets to the point where you just kind of breeze through them with absolutely no effort whatsoever, and any atmosphere and tension they used to have is purely gone because you've just done it so many times at this point. And quite frankly, with the main missions, you can quite often tell when the game wants you to go through a BT area because there'll basically be a bunch of impassable mountains surrounding a forest, and you basically have no choice but to go through the BT area, which takes the whole map and route plotting thing that I discussed earlier completely out of the equation and completely devalues it entirely, and sharply bringing us on to the mules, the human enemies, the obligatory compulsive enemies that you needed to have in your video game, otherwise it wouldn't have been a video game. These are the only enemies that really have any combat or gameplay whatsoever, and weirdly enough, I feel the game would have been a lot better without them. The idea is, a lot like with the BTs, is you're supposed to avoid them and use stealth, but these enemies have impeccable vision and a scanner that basically sees you wherever you are, which means most of these sections devolve into, well, this. Yeah, there really isn't much else to be said. You can obtain weapons that makes these sections easier, but to be honest, I try my hardest to just completely avoid them, if I'm completely honest. They really aren't all that fun. Fighting the enemies is really clunky and heavy feeling, and it's just a bit of a spam fest. These sections are not that good, but they can be mostly avoided, so yeah, whatever. Something else that really bothers me is that Norman Reedus must have been kind of expensive, because he seems surprisingly absent from a lot of cutscenes in this game. Now, there was one cutscene in particular that really bothered me, and it's one where the voice actress sounds like she can't actually speak English and she's just reading off a teleprompter, and this really completely took me out of the experience, 100%. And again, during this cutscene, Norman Reedus literally says nothing. In fact, he even ends the cutscene by giving a thumbs up instead of saying anything, and it's really weird, man. I can't explain it.
Take me with you. Please. I have to see him again. It's him. It's really him. Just say you'll take me.
Excuse me, what?
And this is just one example of many instances where this happens. It's really weird and really distracting, but this cutscene in particular bothered me. Why couldn't they just get Norman Reedus on board fully if he was busy? Like, wasn't that the point? The whole game is being sold on his appearance more than anything, and yet, for whatever reason, he's barely in it. It's kind of unusual, man. Maybe I'm just nitpicking, but I really did expect to see a lot more of Norman Reedus actually being in the game that he is taking part in, which, you know, it's just weirded me out. There's just one thing with Death Stranding, one thing that drives me and a lot of other people completely insane, and that is that Death Stranding commits the cardinal sin of video gaming. It's boring. It really is. It's boring and it's not that fun to play at times, and it really does drive the experience so far into the ground. It really gets at you, you know? You're playing it for so long and it just grinds at you. You keep thinking, is something going to happen? Is the story going to change? Am I going to get another cutscene that expands upon the story? Is it ever going to continue? And then you'll get 10 hours of gameplay with nothing. Not even a bit of exposition, and it just drives you up the fucking wall. Because ultimately all you do in Death Stranding is go from one place to another and then back and forth again 100 times. And when I checked how long this game was, after hours and hours of frustration with no story and no fun, I found out the game was 50 hours long. 50 hours of this! And quite frankly, it's put me off. I really do not want to finish this game, because if this is all it is for the rest of the game, I'm honestly not sure if I can continue playing it. The ridiculous amount of repetition and grinding this game expects you to do just to get any payoff whatsoever is really not worth it in my opinion. Ultimately, nothing you do, no upgrades you get, nothing you unlock really changes the experience all that much. Even vehicles don't make the game more fun, they just make it more boring. Despite how much there is to love about Death Stranding, there is an equal amount to hate, and this is one of the main problems with it. It's just not that fun. And for the last 3 or 4 hours of gameplay, I really was just hoping something was going to happen with the story, or something with the gameplay was going to change in a major way that made me enjoy the game more, but at this point I'm not so sure it's going to happen, and learning that I've got another 25 hours of this to come really doesn't give me any hope whatsoever. If you would like an example of what the average mission is like in Death Stranding, here is a clip that I've sped up so you can see just what the average mission is like. It starts out with you accepting the order and then managing your inventory to make sure things are distributed properly on your body. You do this every time. Then you bring up the map and plot a route where you're going to go. Usually this devolves around to going in a straight line, but sometimes it can deviate. I tend to usually take the simplest route, even though it has dangers involved with it. Once that's done, you start walking, and you keep walking, and you keep walking, and then this is it. This is the average Death Stranding mission. You keep walking, you keep walking, you keep walking, you keep checking your map, you keep checking where you're going, you keep walking, and this is the whole game. Suddenly the rain comes, and then, you know BTs are coming soon, so you may as well be prepared for that. Oh look, here's the BTs, and now you've got to deal with the BTs as well, while you continue walking. And this is it. The game never changes. It's always the same way. You're always doing the same thing. Sure, the missions vary up slightly, but it all amounts to just going from one place to another and then back to that place. This is an entire mission here, and a main story mission at that. This is not a side mission, this is part of the main quest. You have to do this mission to complete the game. And there's been some theories online that Death Stranding is this way by design, that it is intended to bore you, it is intended to be monotonous. And you know what? I am 100% inclined to agree. I believe Death Stranding is functioning exactly as it is intended to. I don't think Death Stranding is flawed by design. I think Death Stranding is functioning. It works. It's designed to be this way, and it works this way. It frustrates you as the player, and it is clearly designed to make the player feel a similar feeling that Sam is feeling, the main character. You're meant to feel the hopelessness of his journey just as he does. This idea of communicating with the player in this way is something that's never been done before. Unfortunately, what it has resulted in is a game that is, quite frankly, boring. A game that is, quite frankly, unfun. A game that is, quite frankly, bad. Bad at being a video game, missing out on the pure fundamentals of what a game should be. Missing out on a core gameplay loop that keeps the player entertained and indulged in the experience. The immersion levels may be through the roof at some points, but that doesn't matter, because once you get bored and frustrated, your immersion completely goes out the fucking window. Death Stranding is a video game. It's just not a particularly good video game. But Death Stranding definitely is a unique experience. A unique experience unlike anything I have ever experienced. And would I recommend it to people based on the fact that it's a unique experience? For $60? No, I would not recommend Death Stranding for $60. If you find the game cheap and are simply curious, go ahead. I'd say the game is completely worth a shot, because you never know. This kind of stuff might not be the thing that bothers you, but for me, the idea of going back and continuing this experience just isn't something that I find fun, especially when the amount of video games out there that are fun, that provide an insanely good gameplay loop, that keep me addicted and keep me playing and keep me immersed, are insurmountable. Death Stranding is definitely a Hideo Kojima game. A Hideo Kojima game in the sense that it is so divisive and has caused so many people to have a very strong and wild opinion about it. I think Death Stranding has served its purpose. I think Kojima wanted this kind of response to his game. And while I am impeccably interested in where the story is going and what's going to happen with the characters and where all this is leading to, I'm really not that interested in continuing to play it because the actual playing of Death Stranding is the part that I'm not enjoying anymore. And that's not to say that I didn't enjoy it, because during the first few hours, the opening hours with plenty of cutscenes and plenty of stuff to look at and plenty of things to do and plenty of new things, the game was fun. But that drip feed of content slowly grinds to a halt and you really get into the meat of this game, and the meat of this game is just walking. It's just walking. And that is the biggest problem with Death Stranding. It's just going from A to B, and I really wish there was so much more to this. This could have been a far better experience if it really boiled down to a 15-hour game with a fantastic story, without even changing the gameplay. The gameplay could have stayed the same. If it was just a 15-hour linear experience with a whole bunch of interesting story elements, yeah, this would have been a fucking fantastic game, but instead it sits on a mantelpiece of being a unique experience that doesn't really amount to a whole lot. And while I respect Hideo Kojima and I've been a fan of his for the longest amount of time, I simply cannot continue Death Stranding. I cannot stand Death Stranding.